Hi, everybody. So today we're going to talk about lab safety and lab procedural guidelines. And when we talk about labs in physics, labs are going to be a critical component of the course. We do a lot of labs, a lot of hands-on work in physics, and so we want to make sure that we understand, its importance in a science class. Students must exhibit proper behavior in the lab and adhere to safety guidelines. We need to make sure that people are going to be safe, and we need to make sure that people are able to complete the job that they need to be able to do. And so we need to make sure that we adhere to these guidelines as we go through. All right, so as far as physics is concerned, we're not going to be working with any chemicals. We're not going to be working with any flames, and we rarely, if ever, work with any glass. So a lot of the things that could potentially be dangerous, like in a chemistry lab or something like that, we're not really going to have to deal with in physics. So our lab safety guidelines are not really all that drastic or all that crazy. Um, so first of all, you should not be working alone in the lab. We need to make sure that you are supervised at all times when working in the lab. When you go into the lab, I want you to only bring the items you need to perform the experiment into the lab. All right. So if I tell you, bring your Chromebook, I don't want you to carry your whole book bag in and all your stuff. Just bring what you need into the lab. We want to make sure that the space is not cluttered. People can move around because a lot of times in our physics labs, we're moving around a good amount, and we want to make sure that we give everybody the most clearance we possibly can. Third, report all incidents to the teacher, no matter how minor. So if there's a broken equipment or somebody gets hurt, you want to let me know that that happens. Stay alert in the lab and proceed with caution. So as I said before, the one thing we do in physics lab a lot is we move around a lot. There are labs where that is a critical component of the lab, the experiment. So you need to make sure that you stay alert, you know what's going on around you. We don't want to be walking into another group that's moving, or, somebody's firing a projectile launcher and we get whacked in the head with it because we're not really paying attention to what's going on. So we just want to make sure we're paying attention to those things. Food, beverages, and chewing gum are never permitted in the lab. Okay, so you're going to keep food out, you're going to keep drinks out. I know a lot of you carry water bottles. You're going to leave your water bottles in the classroom. If you're incredibly thirsty, you can walk out of the lab and into the classroom and get a drink and come back. All right, but I want you to leave your drinks, your food, and chewing gum outside the lab at all times. Okay, exercise caution when working with the lab equipment. A lot of the equipment that you're going to be working with is quite expensive. We want to take good care of it. We want to make sure that others are able to use it. So take good care of it, be careful with it. And, you know, along with that is also using it carefully in terms of, measurement and making sure that we're taking good measurements. And we'll talk about that again in a little bit. Keep the work area and apparatus clean and neat. A lot of times at the end of a lab, I'm going to ask you to clean up, or I might ask you to put certain equipment away. So you just want to check in on that sort of thing. We don't want to leave everything just kind of strewn about. And then lastly, horseplay in the lab is very dangerous and not permitted. So we want to make sure that, we're not goofing around in the lab, swinging our meter sticks around or things like that. We want to make sure that everybody is safe. Nobody's going to get hurt. Okay, and then as far as procedurally, we want to make sure that we follow these kinds of guidelines as we're working through labs. A lot of times when students are doing a lab, I'm going to be walking around the room and monitoring for this type of behavior. So I'd like to see these things. These are things you should do. So first, make sure that all the members of the lab group are actively participating. I don't want to see, one person doing all the work and three people sitting around doing nothing. Everybody should have a role. Follow the directions carefully. These are given prior to entering the lab. So I always go through the directions. In fact, a lot of times the directions for a lab are going to be given over video. So I'm going to expect you to have watched the video, maybe taken some notes about how to do the lab, and then the next day you're coming in and doing it. and then check the directions when you're not sure what comes next. So maybe you go back to that video if you're not sure. There's no reason why you should have to ask questions repeatedly that have already been stated. All right. So, sometimes things happen and sometimes something's not clear. And of course, I want you to ask questions when that happens. But a lot of times, you know, the directions have been very clearly spelled out. And for whatever reason, the student isn't really aware of what's going on. So make sure that you're checking the directions for those sort of things. Next, make sure to measure everything carefully. When you go into the lab and you have to take measurements, pay attention to the precision of your measurements. We're going to do a whole lesson on this in class, but main thing, don't just blow through the measurements. Take them carefully. Maybe measure twice in some instances, or have a friend that's also in the group check on it, and make sure that you're recording that with the best possible precision. Keep an eye on your time management and know how much you're expected to finish by the end of the day. All right. So if we go in the lab, okay, I have to get this whole thing done today, or I need to get parts 1 through 6 done today, or whatever it is. Make sure you're aware of how much you need to get done and how much time you have to do it. And then at the end of a lab, ask about cleanup when you're finished. Sometimes you're going to have to break down the equipment. Other classes might be coming in to do something different. Other times, I might have a class doing the exact same lab later in that day, so I might tell you to leave the equipment out. But in any case, always check in. So just ask, Mr. Celona, should I leave the equipment out? Should we break it down? And then we can take care of it from there. So if we're doing these things and we're paying attention to our lab safety, we should have great experiences in the lab, and we have lots of awesome hands-on labs in physics that I think you're going to enjoy. So that's pretty much it from me.